So this is the book we're going to look at today, The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I haven't read it yet, but I really like the sound of it, and so I am going to read it at the next available opportunity. But let's have a look at a passage which a student sent me. I think it's quite interesting, and it will give you a little a better understanding of phrases and clauses, because we'll look at this first part, and I hope everybody can see that is a main clause. It's a main clause because we could put a full stop at the end of it. Yeah, the world is shrivelling beyond the windows. Okay, and that is obviously the word is there that's been shortened. But notice then afterwards we have a comma and we have darkening at the edges and blackening at the centre. So you could consider this a list of 3 verb phrases. If you want to, you could consider it a list of 3 finite verbs. The world is shrivelling, and it is darkening at the edges, and it is blackening at the centre. But we just miss the verb to be each time. But you could consider these 3 finite verbs with a subject, the world, yeah, each time. Or you could consider that a main clause and then a comma and 2 participle phrases, darkening at the edges and blackening at the centre, describing the subject of the main clause, which is the world. Yeah, and it doesn't really make any difference if you consider it a main clause and 2 participle phrases, or a main clause, the whole thing, you can consider the whole thing a main clause with 3 verb phrases. Both ways of understanding the sentence are correct, and really they're equal. But that's how it starts. So we've got, you know, the world is shrivelling, darkening and blackening. And do notice things like you've got at the edges, which is a prepositional phrase, and it's the opposite of at the centre. Yeah, it's darkening at the edges and blackening at the centre. And so do notice these little tricks that the writer uses. It's a very interesting book, and this is why I plan on reading it later. But the hunters are beginning to emerge from the forest. Okay, so that's a main clause. We could put a full stop at the end there. And notice that we've got beginning. They are beginning. That's our main verb. And then we've got a 2 plus infinitive as the object of beginning. Yeah, they are beginning to emerge. Yeah, we can consider it functioning as a noun because it's the object of beginning. Yeah, it's what they are beginning to do. So they are beginning to emerge. And then we've got a prepositional phrase, from the forest, that describes the verb emerge. Yeah, where are they emerging? They're emerging from the forest. Then we've got a comma, and again we've got a participle, and I see participles very quickly because I look for that ing ending, which they very often have. But please remember that, yeah, finite verbs very often end in ing for present continuous or past continuous or present perfect continuous. And so gerunds also end with an ing. And so be aware that it's not just participles that end in an ing, but this one is a participle ending in an ing, and it's because it's describing the hunters. What were the hunters doing? They were waddling across the lawn like overgrown birds. And there's already a simile there with the word like. Like and as make similes, but if you don't use like or as, it's usually a metaphor. So waddling across the lawn like overgrown birds describes the hunters. Having grown, there's a perfect participle. It's a perfect participle, not a perfect gerund, because it is describing the I. I have grown impatient in my parlour, waiting for Cunningham's return. So having grown is a perfect participle. Having grown impatient, notice that grow is a copular verb. Yeah, and we can say it's a copular verb because we can use an adjective after it. You grow impatient. And when you grow impatient, impatient describes you, just like I am impatient, I got impatient, I grew impatient. They're all copular verbs, and that's why we can use an adjective after the verb grow. So having grown impatient, where? Grown impatient where? You grew impatient in your parlour. So this is adverbial. It's describing where you grew impatient, and so it must be adverbial. And you grew impatient doing what? You grew impatient waiting for Cunningham's return. Okay, so that's another participle. It describes the way in which you were growing impatient. So because it's describing the way in which you were growing impatient, it's an adverb. Remember, adverbs describe adjectives as well as the job